Spirit 92.9 welcomes you to The Lunch Break with your friends Josh, Jess, and Rachel. Join us as we chat about life, food, faith, and everything in between.
Well, welcome to the Lunch Break podcast. We're Josh and Jess and Rachel, and this is season 2, episode 5. Wow, we are just 2 episodes away now from wrapping up season 2. And today we're going to tackle kind of a tougher topic. We're going to talk about spiritual unity. We're actually recording this podcast on Election Day, 2024. And definitely maybe not feeling unity among our country, but as believers and followers of Jesus Christ, how do we experience unity even when we don't all agree on everything? How do we show God's love in spite of all of that? We're going to have a conversation around that today, and we're so glad that you joined us.
That's right. So before we start, though, we started the Lunch Break podcast because we found out we have the best conversations around the lunch table. So we bring our lunch with us. So who wants to share what's in their lunchbox first?
I do.
Okay, go Josh.
Mine is not not a crock pot this time.
Shocker.
And not in a lunchbox because it is soup. And it is soup that I made in my Dutch oven.
Oh.
We're officially in a soup season now.
Yeah.
We're recording this in November. It's been a little bit chillier. And so I made some white chicken chili last night, and I brought that today. So after we record, gonna heat that up and eat it. It's really easy. It's mostly one of those like dump cans of stuff in, but it's really, really delicious as well.
Those are the best. And leftovers for days, right?
Yeah.
So I did not bring a soup this time, even though it is soup season. I actually brought a spicy tuna rice bowl, and it's literally takes 15 minutes to do. It's rice, greens, spicy tuna, and then cucumbers, and you're done. So that's what I brought.
Okay, in true fancy Rachel form.
So fancy. Spicy tuna.
Not fancy.
Well, in full transparency, I totally forgot my leftovers at home today.
Oh, no.
But a couple days ago, I made spaghetti, and so I've been eating that. You know how that is? You can eat leftovers for like 3 days, kind of like soup. But my recipe part of it, something that I kind of do is make things halfway homemade. And so I might use like a jar sauce, but then I'll kind of, spice it up a little bit. And so my recipe this week will be halfway homemade spaghetti sauce.
Nice.
I like that name. It's kind of catchy. Halfway homemade.
I like that.
Yeah.
And if you want to find the recipes for everything that we just mentioned, they're on our website, spirit929.com, in the recipe box. So make sure to check that out. Okay, here we go. We're diving into this conversation about spiritual unity, specifically focusing on the body of Christ and how do we remain unified in the body of Christ. So who wants to start us off? Dun, dun, dun.
This is a hard one. I feel like, we're talking about the world being divided, especially on Election Day, but within the church, we can be so divided too. And I think the main point here before we dig into any of these topical things is that we want to always be pointing people to Jesus. And so oftentimes when we're divided, the enemy loves that, right? Because if he can keep us divided and arguing with each other, then we are so much less effective in bringing people into the kingdom family, into God's family, sharing the gospel, telling people about God's love for them, because we're too busy fighting with each other, right? And so how do we kind of do that so that we're not giving in to the enemy's plan, but instead bringing people into the family? And I think it starts with love. I think it starts with, focusing on the main thing, which is the gospel. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, and we had all kind of noted that in our show notes that we got to keep the main thing the main thing. The main thing is Jesus. And how often do we let secondary issues distract us from Jesus and his gospel?
Yeah.
And it's really easy to do. We get it. We get worked up about a lot of stuff, and we get worked up about everything from interpretation of scripture to how the church should respond to X, Y, Z. You know, like there's a lot of things. There's a lot of issues, a lot of things that we can and do get divided over. But keeping the main thing, that's what's ultimately going to help us focus. And I think it's important too to realize just how critical unity is. Like it is, I wanted to share a little bit of what Jesus prayed for, because he prayed the night before he died. He was praying for his disciples, and he prayed for us as well. He said, my prayer is not for them alone, not the disciples alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. So you think about that unity that God the Father has with God the Son, Jesus. He wants us to have that same kind of unity, like so much so that he prayed for it 2,000 years ago. And if Jesus is taking unity that seriously, then we need to be taking it that seriously as well.
Yeah. And, you know, I know we're all talking about keeping the main thing the main thing. And I think when we do have that approach of remembering that whatever we're doing, no matter what it is, we should be representing Jesus. When we take that approach, when there are times where there are things that can be kind of quote unquote divisive, when we're viewing other people as a fellow child of God, I think that changes a lot of things for us, because sometimes I think when these divisive things come up, even especially if we have a strong opinion about whatever that thing is, we can start to other people. Does that make sense? Where like we can start to say, well, they believe this and that's not what I believe, so then they're wrong. And when we have that type of mindset about these things, we are completely separating a fellow child of God. We're completely separating them from us. And I think that that's where a lot of our issues can lie when it comes to having issues with unity and divisiveness. We are all children of God, and we have all fallen short of the glory of God. We are all sinners that are saved by grace. And when we kind of put other people on that even footing, it starts to change how we approach situations and how we deal with times where things can be divisive. When we start to view other people in the same way that we view ourselves of, I am a sinner that's saved by grace, and thank God that grace exists, and thank the Lord that he loves me even though I make mistakes. When we start to view people, other people that way, I think that's where unity starts to happen.
Yeah. I think oftentimes we view other people as the enemy instead of the enemy as the enemy, right? And one of my favorite authors, Carlos Whitaker, he always says, don't stand on issues, walk with people. And issues are important, but people are more important, right? And I came out of a background that was very conservative, and so I kind of grew up in that way, so to speak, grew up as an adult, of looking at other people within the church at like kind of an us versus them mentality. And we believe this and we're right. And then you've got the rest of the church who's got it all wrong, and we need to help them get it right, you know? And so that would kind of develop almost this superiority complex. That's a hard word for me to say. And so just thinking about that and chewing on those words of not standing on issues and walking with people, realizing that issues are important. But it's like you said, Rachel, we first have to see each other as human beings, as children of God, fellow people that God loves, and then create that relationship. Because if we just come at them and start telling them, I mean, if anyone's ever done that to you, they come at you and start telling you all the things that you're wrong about, what do? You get defensive, right? You're not going to get anywhere, you know, in creating unity if that's how you're approaching people and treating people. And so something I've just learned within recent years is people first. Like, treat people as humans first. And then we can talk about those issues once we've created a relationship and I trust you and that you have, you know, my best interest at heart and you trust me and believe the same thing. then we can kind of get into those deeper conversations. But often we just come yielding our sword
Yeah.
at people we don't know and trust, you know?
That's the thing, that you've got to build equity with someone before you can speak into their life about these
Yeah.
things. And that's why I dare say internet comment sections are such a bad idea, because all you see about a person is their comment that you vehemently disagree with. And so
Yeah.
you just want to go at that person, and it doesn't really do anybody any good. And so, yeah, like you said, just building that relationship, and then you have that unity together. And then even if you disagree on some other issues, that's okay, because you know you're for each other.
Yeah.
I think so often for us as people, we focus on what divides us. We focus on, well, I have this opinion, they have that opinion, and it's different, so then we are different. And I think we are all so much more alike than we think. And when we get into that divisive mindset, that's where it all stems from. That's where it all comes from. And when we start to, realize that we are more similar than we think, and we all experience life in a very similar way, and we all struggle with a lot of the same things, then I think that's where unity will start. When we start to say, yeah, you're just like me.
Yeah. And the whole idea of like, just because we disagree on something, that doesn't equal hatred.
Right.
Right? If I disagree on something with you, I don't hate you. I just disagree with your idea, right? And so we have to kind of learn that we don't have to agree on things to be kind to each other and to show each other love. And imagine if within the church, if we stopped looking at each other and thinking about those things first, like you said, focusing on our differences, and instead focused on, hey, we both love Jesus. And, we both want the best for each other. That would just so change our relationships within the church body.
Yeah. I'm a big sports guy, so I always got to go back to my sports analogies. But I just think about like a football team, right? And there are times when coaches on the football team will really disagree with each other about what play they should run, what the game plan should be. When fans, like I'm in a group with a bunch of Packers fans, and we'll talk a lot, and sometimes we'll disagree about what the Packers should be doing. But then when the Packers are out there on the field, we are cheering for them. Like we get excited when they score touchdowns. And so, we keep the main thing. Like we're all Packers fans, right? How much more should that be in the body of Christ? Keeping Jesus the main thing. And yeah, we're going to disagree about some other things, but if, like we've already said, we can keep Jesus the main thing, that's going to solve a lot of our issues with unity.
Yeah, it's true. And I think the other thing that I keep thinking about is, so I have a lot of friends that have different opinions than me. And we have had those hard conversations when we do have differing opinions. But at the end of every conversation, the main thing is, I love you and I respect your opinion. Even though we disagree, that doesn't mean that I don't love you. And I wish that we could reach that conclusion a lot more often when we have these hard conversations of, yeah, I have a different opinion than you, but that doesn't mean that I love you any less. And that doesn't mean that I respect you any less. And I think that does come with spiritual maturity, to be able to say, even though I have a different opinion than you, I still respect you. And I wish that we could do that more in these hard conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we're talking a lot about unity within the church, but we have to remember the people who are not yet a part of the family of God, who are not yet believers in Jesus or following Jesus, they're watching us.
Yeah.
And they're like, they can't even get along with each other. Why do I want what they have? But when they see us treating each other with love and respect, despite our differences, well, then they're attracted to what it is that we're, trying to invite them into. And so we have to be mindful. Part of this is our testimony, our example to other people, is if, man, it's kind of like within your family. If you can't get along within your own family, then why does anyone want to come over for dinner? Because they don't want to watch you all sit and fight with each other,
Yeah.
Kind of the same idea. You want people to come to your church and hear about Jesus, but you're all bickering. They're not going to want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Well, Jesus said a house divided against itself cannot stand, right? And that it's just common sense. And yet how often do we kind of forget that. And we are divided against each other.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard. And we have to look, like you said, Josh, to Jesus' example. You think of those times when he came up upon people who were in sin. Think of the woman at the well, or the woman, in the Bible who was being stoned for her sin or whatever. He knew that they did something that was wrong, but he didn't pick up a stone and throw it at her too. And he didn't, shame the woman at the well and send her packing. He showed them love in spite of the things that they were doing wrong. He showed them love, and he showed them a better way in a gracious and kind way. And if we follow that example, then people are going to be more inclined to want what we have because we're not throwing a stone, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely in times like we're in right now where we need to be like Jesus now more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, Jess, people are watching us. And I think that sometimes because we can get into this divisive mindset a lot of the time, people have a very warped view of what Jesus is.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, Lord, forgive us for that. Lord, forgive us for the times where we stand on those issues and we don't walk with people.
Mm-hmm.
Because I never in my life want to misrepresent Jesus and how he loves us and how he gives us grace, how he died on that cross for us. That's what I want people to know about Jesus. I don't want people to see Jesus and Christianity as constantly battling and warring with each other and being divisive. I want them to see it as a loving place and how the church is supposed to be a hospital for the broken. That's what Jesus is all about. And people need that now more than ever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard, right? I mean, and I'm thinking of other people, even in my life, who are like, no, you have to take a stand. You have to take a stand. These things are wrong. If we don't say they're wrong, then the world's not going to know they're wrong. And I understand that. And we talked about that. Like, the issues, they do matter, but they're not the most important thing. And we have to remember that if people don't even know Jesus yet, those issues, they don't see them the way you do because they're not looking through God's eyes at these things. And so first things first, Jesus and his love, and focus on that and the gospel. And from there, you can have those conversations once you've built that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, are we ready for questions from the lunchbox?
Yes.
Okay.
Questions from the lunchbox. We do this on every Lunch Break podcast episode because I have a lunchbox that looks like a boombox. Rachel is showing it off right now. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, you can check that out. And so we just ask some questions based on the topic. So Rachel, what do we got today?
Okay. Question number 1. How do we Hey, let's start over. Okay. How do we move toward unity and away from division?
I think it's what we've been talking about this whole time, right?
Yep.
Like keeping the main thing, focusing on loving people and walking with people and not focusing on those issues, because when we see what we disagree with in other people and we focus on that, there can't be unity.
Yeah.
Right?
Maybe some of that is just practicing too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When somebody disagrees with you, instead of shying away from them, because it's really easy to just go to our own little tribe and, everybody thinks exactly like me. Like, go to that person, talk to them. Let's practice unity so that we can get better at it collectively. If we practice it personally, we get better at it collectively.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, Josh, of that there are going to be people that have different opinions than us. Duh. Like, that's just going to happen because we weren't all created the same. We weren't all created that we were going to have the same opinions. And if we were, good Lord, the world would be boring because you have to have those differing opinions. And differences in a lot of ways are healthy. They are good things. When you have different opinions in people, that's healthy and good. And so I think in some situations, differences are going to happen and they should be celebrated in a way, because if you are just going and you're being just met with like this, sounding board of like, yes, I agree, and yes, 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 well then is that healthy? Is that something that's good? I think that it's something that we have to be ready for, of like, yeah, people are going to have different opinions than us, and that in some ways can be a really good thing. And understanding that when differences are brought to the table and saying, but we still agree and we say the main thing is the main thing, we all love Jesus, that's what brings unity, even when we have differences.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's some things, that might be considered non-negotiables. We go to the Bible for our truth and we, hash those things out. But you're right. Like, we're not on the things that aren't huge. We're not going to all ever get to the same place. That would be wonderful, wouldn't it? But, focus on the things that matter the most and let some of those other things go. Ask yourself, is this worth fighting about? Is this like a make it or break it type of a thing? And then if it's not, let it go,
Yep. Let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go. Okay, next question. Okay. Sometimes it feels like it takes a tragedy before we unite and remember what really matters. So an example is 9/11.
Yeah.
How can we live like that every day?
Oh, boy.
That's hard, right? To have that mindset. I mean, I know 9/11, we're speaking more on a national scale than a church scale. Mm-hmm. But you do think about those days after 9/11 and how the country was so united, and there are people lining up out the doors to give blood, and everybody's asking, how can we help? And that was like, in my lifetime, the most united that America has ever been. How can we emulate that in the church, and not just after something big happens? It's hard to have that mentality, because when a tragedy happens, it changes things.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if, again, it's just trying to think about this and live out unity practically every day.
Yeah.
And instead of just waiting for something to happen that forces us to unify.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's kind of when that does, it just kind of rocks you to your core a little bit. Mm-hmm. It shakes up your soul, right? And so it makes you think about it, where on the daily basis, you're not thinking about, am I practicing unity today? Have I, done this or done that? In the same way that if something happened, like a tragedy within your church family even, or something like that, to where all of a sudden everybody pulls together and unites and is working together to serve and be a blessing to the community or whatever it is, So I don't know what the answer to that is. I guess it's like Josh said, it's something that maybe we're not aware of very much, and that we have to kind of be intentional about creating and being an example of. You're not going to get everybody on board, but you can kind of start a wave of unity.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also acknowledging that unity is possible. I think sometimes we can get really cynical, if we were honest. We can get really cynical about our world, and we can think, well, how in the world is this? Through Jesus. It's through Jesus. Unity happens through Jesus. And so I think that we can get in this mindset of like, oh, well, it's never going to happen and it's not even worth it. Why should we even try? Oh, no, don't do that. Please don't do that. Don't think that unity isn't possible because of the bad things that are happening in the world right now. Because we know who is on the throne. No matter what happens in the future, we know who is in control. And unity comes through him. So it's saying, yes, unity is possible, and it starts with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you even think back to 9/11. It's like all of a sudden we weren't talking about what made us different. We weren't talking about the things that we disagreed on. We were talking about how we needed to pull together as a country to help. And I think that's the key right there, is that we took those things, again, that didn't matter as much, and we set those differences aside, and we focused on how we could work together as a team for this common goal. Well, in the church, this common goal is to share God's love with people. So if we focused on that thing and kind of let some of those other things go for the moment so that we could be focused on the main thing, how much more productive would we be in accomplishing that, And so kind of just taking that example of what happened on September 11th and, putting that into practice in our own faith and our own church is kind of a starting point anyway.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's do another question.
One more?
Who is someone you know personally or know of who seems to unify others well?
That's a good question. Somebody that came to mind for me was actually an interim pastor we had at my church a couple of years ago. And it was when my church was going through kind of a tumultuous time. This was post-COVID, and we all know what happened with COVID and how that divided a lot of churches, and mine was not exempt from that. And we had our lead pastor, not for that reason, but end up leaving and moving out of state. And so this interim pastor came in, and he did, like, one of the things he preached about, I think it was his last message actually, was keeping the main thing the main thing. Like, he was emphasizing, you know what? Yeah, people have different opinions about COVID, for example, but that's not the main thing. Jesus is the main thing. And part of it was just his demeanor too. He had a very calm demeanor. He was great with people. And so that's somebody that comes to mind for me. Our interim pastor, Paul, was his name, and just a great man.
I'll let you go first. I need to think another second.
Well, it says you know of. I haven't met him personally, but I was going to talk about Carlos Whitaker. He is a master at what we've been talking about this whole episode of not standing on issues, but walking with people. And he has created this entire online community. He calls it his Insta Familia. And he has created this place where so many people of differing opinions, even differing faiths and different walks of life that come together and are a part of this family. And each person feels like they belong in this family and that they are loved. And I think that that is something that's so beautiful. And I think that he has done an incredible job of, no matter what someone believes, he's showing them Jesus' love anyway. And Lord, let me be like that more every day. You know, to be able to truly embody Jesus' pure love for people as they are, with their flaws and their imperfections, and to say you belong anyways. So I would say, Carlos, if you're watching, shout out to you.
Hey. Yeah, I agree with you, because one thing I've noticed is that he doesn't shy away from his faith. He talks about Christianity, but he does it in such a way that is just so like non-judgmental and welcoming, and hey, this is what I believe. And yet people aren't like, oh, I'm out of here, because, you know, he doesn't like alienate people by sharing his faith. He welcomes people in. And so, yeah, I mean, I have a couple other people I was thinking of, but I want to agree with you on that one. And then I also have a friend who just is kind of like I don't know, do you have like not a spokesperson in your friend group, but you kind of just have that one person who kind of pulls everybody together for things.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put names out there or anything, because I don't want to embarrass anybody. But this one person is just that one who, if she knows like there's a little bit of a issue between two people, she'll kind of gently like work her way in there and just kind of pull them together and help facilitate a conversation, or you know, create a get together or something like that where we're all in the same space, so that, you know, we can just remember that we love each other, or whatever it is. Or even within the church, she's kind of someone who's kind of instrumental in pulling things together and different groups together that might not otherwise, you know, be together. And so, yeah, I'm not going to name her name, but she's a good friend, and she's someone who is very aware of people and how she can make those connections. So,
yeah.
Well,
should we do one more question?
Yeah, we can do one more.
Let's do one more. Okay, here we go. Oh, this one's hard.
Oh,
okay,
they're all hard.
When surrounded in a context or situation charged with division, how can you practically, in that moment, choose to rise above that tension and choose unity anyway?
So, like today?
Yeah. Today is election day is a perfect example.
Yeah, I think preparing yourself beforehand, which is, again, what we've been talking about, and practicing that unity, practicing like, hey, Lord, let me be an instrument of your peace. Because if we're not prepared before that situation arises, it's going to be very easy to just fly off the handle and focus on the issues instead of the people, focus on how wrong they are and how right I am. Pride's going to flare up. So really preparing ourselves beforehand, doing what we're doing today, like talking about these things. Like we don't talk about this enough. And so I think you've got to be ready before that situation arises.
Yeah. I think the thing that I have been praying since I woke up this morning, Lord, help me remember that the people that have differing opinions from me are still people that you love. And I think that, we open social media and everyone has their opinions and they are speaking them very loudly. And I just have to constantly remind myself of that these are people that Jesus loves and they deserve respect and they deserve to be loved as Jesus would love them. And I think in those situations that can be very divisive, we have to embody Jesus in those situations.
Yeah, as you were talking about that, I wrote down, don't engage.
Yeah.
We were talking about that this morning, Josh and I, how it's like everything is so charged in this world and atmosphere because of social media, right? Like we can see everybody's opinions and we're just scrolling and like that friend sharing their opinion and that person we don't know and then that friend sharing their opinion and, oh yeah, I don't agree with that. Well, let me tell you what I think. Don't engage. I mean, the comment section on social media is a trap.
It is.
And it can suck you in and you can get so heated and you can say all these things that you, in a way that you wouldn't say it to people's face, right?
That's a great point.
Yeah. So one thing I've taught myself is like, keep scrolling. Don't engage on social media. And then even, you can prepare yourselves, but sometimes these situations happen and you didn't know it was going to happen or you didn't expect it. It just unfolds and you're like, what do I do? What do I do? Again, when I say don't engage, I mean engage to a certain extent where you're showing love or trying to bring peace to the situation. But it's just not worth it to just engage in these fights, even if it's face to face with people or you're out on the street or you're at the polls or you're in church and someone tells you what they didn't like about, the sermon today. You don't need to engage that and make it worse. You can be the peacemaker in the situation.
Yep.
You can be the one who calms and brings, peace and calmness to the situation.
Yeah. Well, on that note, just wanted to share this prayer from St. Francis of Assisi as we wrap up today. And it's, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. What a beautiful picture that is, an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. And so that is our prayer for ourselves. That is our prayer for our church, that we would be instruments of God's peace. And so thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Lunch Break Podcast. And you can always check out all of our other episodes from season 2, as well as the entirety of season 1 on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. You can watch us on the Spirit 92.9 YouTube channel. And we hope you have a great rest of your day. And we hope you'll join us for the next episode.
Thank you.
Bye.